Tashi Delay, everyone, and welcome to Tibet Talks. I'm Ashwin Verghese of the International Campaign for Tibet, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the second episode in our four-part special series on the four principal commitments of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Today, we'll be taking a look at his second commitment, a commitment to the promotion of religious harmony. Now, the Dalai Lama is probably the world's most famous Buddhist, and he is a spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhists, both outside and inside Tibet. Yet, despite this one-of-a-kind background, His Holiness is committed to the principle of religious harmony. In fact, he believes all major world religions have the same potential to create good human beings. And therefore, it's important for different religious traditions to recognize the value in one another and to respect one another. But don't just take my word for that. Let's hear now the words of His Holiness himself.
One of my commitment is try to promote genuine harmony among different religious traditions. For that, genuine harmony is developed on the basis of mutual respect, mutual admiration.
Now that we've heard from the Dalai Lama, let's explore his second commitment with our special guest for today's Tibet Talk, Professor Siddiq Wahid. Siddiq Wahid traces his family to the Tibetan Muslim community in Lhasa, Tibet's capital city. His father was one of the last caravanners bringing the official tributes from the people of Ladakh to His Holiness at a time when there was still peace and harmony in the Himalayas before Communist China's occupation of Tibet. Today, Professor Wahid is a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research. He has also been involved in numerous interfaith engagements and conferences organized by His Holiness. Recently, Professor Wahid spoke with our ICT president, Tencho Getzo. Let's hear their conversation now.
Hello, Siddiq. It's so good to have you join us here straight from Srinagar, thanks to all this online abilities we have.
And thank you. It's wonderful to be here also. Thank you.
So I think we can start off right away. Siddiq,
Yes.
I want to start first by asking you to share with us, and you and your family have a special connection to Tibet. Can you share with us your connections to
Yes.
Tibet, Tibetans, and His Holiness?
Yes. I think we can go as far back for the direct link with Tibet. We can go as far back as 1820, because by that time we as a family was settled in Ladakh, and that migration took place from actually on the male side from Kashmir, and the migration from Kashmir took place in about somewhere between 1690 and 1710. So between the 17th and the 18th century, the turn of the century. And we went there from Kashmir as traders, and very quickly became landed gentry or who owned land, and then started to also trade. The first batch from our family, or one branch of the family is a better word to use, I think, went from Ladakh to Leh to Lhasa in 1820. I think the 20s about, sort of mid-20s or so is what I've been able to peg it to. And we started to sort of about 20 or 30 years thence, we also started to get involved in the Lochak, or the annual tribute, which was actually biannual, or actually also sometimes people say triannual, depending on the fortunes of the family that was doing the lokjak, and there were one or two families doing it. Ours was one of them, you know. And it was unique because as a Muslim family, we were doing it. And so that was where we established our connection.
This was the tribute from the king of Ladakh.
Ladakh to the Potala Palace.
Potala.
Yes, and it was then, and the return sort of visit was a group, a family from Lhasa who would be called the Chaba, and they would come and bring tea to trade. So it was a sort of like a tribute come trade mission either way, you know. And so that was how our family got established there. And so by the time the 1950s rolled around, it was well over a century, almost a century and a half now. Yes.
So, as you were saying, I think most people will be surprised to hear, many are surprised when we tell them that Tibet was also home to pockets of Muslim community and that we had several mosques in Lhasa and also in Shigatse, and I've grown up kind of hearing the closeness and the relations between the Islamic and Buddhist communities in Lhasa and in Tibet. Can you give our viewers an understanding of that relationship and the history of it?
Yes. Actually, it's not very surprising that there should be Tibetan speaking Muslims in Lhasa, because if you look at a map, and very often people don't look at a map. I tell our younger generation, look at a map, and when you'll see that there were trading Muslim communities surrounding Tibet in a lot of ways, because there were people from Xinjiang coming into Tibet. There were people from, Ladakh, which is abutted by Kashmir, which is the Muslim community that were coming in. In Amdo, of course, there was a Hui community, as well as some Tibetan speaking who were there also. So it's not at all surprising that there should be, and they, of course, came to the center in thing. And at that time, both, an expansionist, shall we say, Qing dynasty was also coming in into Xinjiang and Tibet, and influencing these two regions very largely, including Mongolia. So because of this, I think that there was a cosmopolitan air, if you will, in Lhasa very much, and there were people, from Muslim communities, both Tibetan speaking and Mandarin speaking, who were mixing there. And in fact, in our own family, I think there has been a marriage into the Hui on the woman's side. So we have some, who are a mix of that also in our family. So that's how I think the connection came to be established. And it is, at least 3 centuries long, if not longer, the connection.
And also the Ladakhi Muslim community also has contributions into Tibetan culture as well, with the Nangma Tushe songs. Those
absolutely, yes, very much.
And then was it during the 5th Dalai Lama that the Ladakhi community was more established with?
Yes, it was during the 5th, and it was a very generous sort of offer for land and territory and so forth. And legend has it, and this could be apocryphal, but there was an arrow drawn from the Potala, then fired, and the area that came within the ambit of that arrow was given to the community to settle in and so forth. And certainly, I went, and as an adult, because I spent the first, in fact, 4 years of my life in Lhasa, having been born in Kalimpong in 1951. Then my parents took me there to Lhasa, and my sister was born in Lhasa itself. So it was a fairly sort of well-established tradition for sort of Muslims to be living in Lhasa and then interacting with the Tibetan community, the Lhasa Tibetan Buddhist community, Nangpa, very, very comfortably. And I remember that, very, very well. My grandparents and so forth, they continued that relationship even after coming. They left, I think, in 1957, if I'm not mistaken, and came directly to Kashmir. So in a sense, came full circle. And the objective was to go to Leh. And so I remember as a young kid, basically I was about not even 7 yet. And my grandfather took me to Leh because I'd never been to Leh before then. And then he came back, and as an adult, I inquired. I said, "What was that trip about?" That trip was to see where we could settle in Lhasa. In Leh. And he said, "Well, Leh was too small a village for us after Lhasa, so we settled down in Kashmir itself."
Kashmir.
So,
I
yes.
see.
So that's how
Yes.
our family sort of took place. Yes.
Yes, my mother was saying you fondly remembers your father, and she says Waila, Waila. So I thought
Yes.
we were talking about a Tibetan, but
Yes,
then,
exactly.
oh,
Yes. And my father, of course, was a very deep Tibetophile, and he loved it. And I remember he gave up his job in 1958, actually, in preparation for His Holiness's coming, and said that we owe it to His Holiness to help the resettlement of the Tibetan refugees who are being anticipated to come along with him. So it was a very, very deliberate move on his part to work with the government in exile then, almost immediately in 1959, starting in 1959.
and your father has written about his experiences also.
Yes, he has. He has, and the book is called Tibetan Caravan. And it's built around the Lopcha mission, because one of the last ones, I think it was the last but one caravan in 1942 that my father went along with my grandfather on. And when he went on it, he started to practice his English. He had just finished his BA from Aligarh University, and he started to write his diary. So the opening words in the book are from that diary, having left his wife of literally about 3 weeks or so, and he was gone for the next year. I don't know how people would consider that in the modern age, so to have your husband suddenly leave you 20 days after you get married, but that was what it was. And he went all the
For
way
a
to
year-long trip.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yes.
So tell me, Siddiq, I want to ask you from your personal experience also, because we're talking about His Holiness here. When and how was your first interaction with His Holiness? Can you share with us?
Yes, I've been thinking about it. I think it would have been the mid 60s. I think 63, 64 or so. My father was in Dharamshala with His Holiness, and I came from school. I was schooled in Darjeeling, and I came for holidays, and he said, "You must go and meet His Holiness." And so it would have been around that time that I met him for the first time. I remember I was taken for an audience with him, and there were about 6 or 10 of us, somewhere in that number. And we were waiting in the anteroom. And suddenly His Holiness walked in, very simply and very, as he is wont to be, and things. And all of the students got up. We were about the same age, I think, 12, 13, 14, that age category. And of course, all of them bowed down because they knew exactly what to do. So I also bowed down. Immediately, imitating them completely. And His Holiness, I think, knew who I was, because he walked up and he straightened me up and he said, "You're a Muslim. You're not allowed to bow down before human beings. I'm a human being, so you should not bow down." You cannot imagine the impact that it had on someone like me. I will never ever, I've never ever forgotten it. And it was the most gentle instruction that he was giving me. And it was on two occasions that it struck me as to how compassionate, I mean, that's the only word you can think of, he was in trying to inculcate in me a sense of what it was to be a Muslim. You know, it was that sort of thing, and very transparent to me even at that time. I, of course, was completely dumbstruck. I mean, I didn't say anything. What am I going to say? So I just obeyed him. That's it.
A young teenager.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And you've been involved since then, organizing and helping facilitate many interfaith, interreligious events with His Holiness. What do you think are the key principles and values that His Holiness advocates for fostering religious harmony?
I think, first of all, what struck me during these, and I've been very fortunate, and I have every time I have been asked, and on at least one or two of the occasions, directly by your own father, who said, you have to be involved. So I dropped everything. I mean, there was not a question that I would do it, because my father would want it any differently than that. And so I went, and what strikes me is his ability to listen, to what somebody is saying, and then cut through the jargon, and whether it is academic or whether it is, specific to one confessional religion or the other, and actually translate what is being said into plain language, and language that can be understood by anybody. So that was the one thing that has struck me every time. I mean, that I've had an occasion to be involved in an event, or even not involved in an event, but just being there and listening to him speak. I think that was it. I think his sort of articulation of secular ethics in this day and age is something that is, for me, a very central piece, I think, of the message that he wants to bring. I think, to be very honest, the use of the word secular ethics is something that I struggle with in terms of understanding. But I fully see where His Holiness is coming from. And I think that what he's doing is trying to sort of find a common sort of basic point of interaction, that we can have as human beings. And as we know, and his ability to sort of say that without any sense of, wanting to convert anybody,
Exactly.
God forbid, into Buddhism, or encourage anybody to convert them to Islam, for that matter, and so it's completely sort of missing in that. So in that sense, it makes a lot of sense. And God knows that in this day and age, where we live in the age of what I call extremes and only quantity, he represents the middle path. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but a middle path, and also a life of quality, the value. And each time he speaks, that comes through very plainly, that he's looking at life in a qualitative way, and I think that everybody notices it as we come. So it's a program, I think, if I can call it that. I mean, that's a misnomer, but I think it's a program for not mere toleration of the other, but trying to extract from the other's philosophy, if you will, something that you can recognize as part of your religion also. And I think, in this way, I mean, my closeness, and I've also had an academic closeness to Buddhism, having studied Tibet and so forth, so it has been hugely enhanced, right through my life, and things enhanced in the way of understanding Islam itself.
Yes.
For example, I mean, if I'm sure you've observed, Lhasa praying, and you see, they're standing straight, and they're praying.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I think my phone is somewhere here. Yeah, I'll have to turn it off. The Muslim, when they pray, they're
Mm-hmm.
praying and standing straight up,
Mm-hmm.
and then bowing down halfway, and then and prostrating on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gained an understanding of that through
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism and the concept of, the mantra,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and the mudra and the mandala,
Mm-hmm.
because in a sense it is all about that even when we pray.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of thing, I think, is facilitated in an interaction with someone like His Holiness, I think.
Yes, I did completely agree, because I remember how often His Holiness says different foods are suited for different bodies, and in that, cultures and religions, they've evolved different ways for different people, so that most of the time, what you are born with is probably best suited for you. So, and every teaching we go to, His Holiness always says, okay, now if you are Christian, think this way. If you are Islam, think
Absolutely.
this, So
Yes.
he's always
Yes.
so willing to bring everybody together.
Yes. And not only that, but for everybody to value the symbols of their religion, And for example, when he meets the Lhasa, and when he meets Tibetan-speaking Muslim also, first question that he'll ask is Shamukabu Khavayis, meaning, why aren't you wearing your white cap? And things. So, I mean, especially in my generation and younger generations, they don't wear that anymore, very much. So, and his insistence is, I don't think it's the white hat, that he's insisting that you wear, but he's saying that, don't be shy about sort of showing attachment to the symbols of your own religion.
And also, His Holiness has we did a ICT. We do a calendar every year, and one year we did it on sacred sites. And
Nice.
for that piece, I was looking for photographs, and there were so many photographs of His Holiness visiting sacred sites of different religions. I think he has, made that extra effort to go in many places. Have you been to like a Muslim sacred space with His Holiness? And maybe can you share with our viewers how he interacts?
Yeah, unfortunately I've not. He's been in Ladakh several times, and he's gone into the mosque. And I'm told that he makes it a point to go into a Sunni mosque and a Shia mosque, knowing that we have problems between the Sunnis and the Shias, also internally sometimes, and things. So he makes it a point to visit them. He's made it a point also, and I think his sort of interventions have helped considerably in the Muslim Buddhist shall we say, quarrels that we've had occasionally in Ladakh, and I'm sure that it's the grace with which he handles it. And his instructions sometimes very elliptical, he'll never be very direct in what he's saying, but it's very elliptical, and everybody understands what he's saying. And as I'm sure I mean, the Ladakhis, both Muslim as well as Buddhist, are very, respectful of and giving full credit to whatever he says, and take it very, very seriously. So I'm sure, I don't know again about the specifics, but I'm sure that his visits to Ladakh have helped heal us, because now there is a warmth that I haven't seen in the last 35, 40 years, between the two communities, which is wonderful to see.
And as we are speaking, His Holiness is
Yes,
again
I know. Yes, in Ladakh. Yes,
in Ladakh, and I think he's spending the whole of August there.
Yes, he is. He spent all of August there, and I think he's going to. He is indefatigable. In some completely tireless. He goes to the schools there. He goes to the mosques there, he goes obviously to the monasteries, wherever he can and things. So in that sense, I mean, I think we're all very fortunate to have His Holiness with us and amongst us.
I was reading also this time when he traveled to Ladakh, as you were saying, this time when
Yeah.
he traveled to Ladakh, I think when he saw all the welcoming people who had lined up,
Yes.
and as he got there, he asked, "Where is the Asakaji?"
Yes,
The
right, exactly.
yes, and I
Yes,
think they heard
yes,
and they made
yes,
an effort to bring all the elders
yes,
who were there from the
absolutely.
original days to meet with
Absolutely.
His
Yes.
Holiness.
Yes. I think it's with a very sort of important message that His Holiness does that. And the important message is that Tibetan society is plural. It's not, and you cannot equate Buddhism with Tibet. It has, in Ladakh, for example, Ladakhi is a Tibetan language, so you have, in a sense, you have Tibetan speaking Christians as well. And lately I saw that he made it a point to go to the Moravian church in Leh, and visit them and things. I'm sure that he would be very happy to go to the school there eventually, and stuff. But no, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have him in Ladakh. Yeah.
And broader speaking, Siddiqla, in your experience working with different faith religious leaders in India from different traditions who've responded to His Holiness in promoting religious harmony, how would you say his impact has been?
Very strong. I think it was in the year 2017 that I was involved in an interfaith gathering that he had in Delhi. And it was from all faiths, both Indic as well as non-Indic religions, such as Islam and things. And they had the, sort of theologians, priests, and in the case of Muslims, they had imams, the leaders of the prayers, all over there and all speaking and things. It was, I felt that it was a very sort of powerful message, that he would send, on these occasions. He is also, for example, known to be very close to Bishop Tutu, for example. And the interaction between them is a camaraderie that, every time I see, it's just a very warm feeling. There seems to be a complete understanding between them as to what the message to the world should be, And I think, I've seen him interacting, of course, with imams, the leaders of the prayer, because technically in Islam, we don't have a priestly group at all, and I've heard one person say that every human being is a priest within Islam, rather than saying there are no priests at all. But so in that sense, we don't have a clergy, in Islam. But I've seen him interact with the imams and talk to them and so forth, and they're extremely, they listen, they're deferential, and so forth. So it's a very one of the interactions I think is wonderful to see, because I think because he listens, they also listen. It's a reciprocal sort of act that happens, and I think that it's something. If you observe these things, then it's just a learning, just to see what's happening. Even if you're not involved in it.
His Holiness as a way of breaking through walls, and I remember hearing that in 2017 at the interfaith event that you mentioned, His Holiness was there at the door, welcoming and receiving all the faith leaders who attended, and also, welcoming them to the event. And I think that those kind of gestures at a very small level, make a difference. With that, I could go on and on, but then I want to also, Siddiqla, how do you think in you have been participating in gatherings. How can individuals as well as religious and political leaders draw inspiration from His Holiness's approach and lessons for promoting interfaith understanding in the broader context?
I think, the key is, of course, His Holiness is very charismatic. Anybody who meets him knows that. But I think that what we have to do really is, we tend to use his popularity, His Holiness's popularity in the person that he is, because he's very affable and he's very thing. But perhaps I think what we need to do is dwell more on the profundity of his ideas, which he sometimes very casually mentions. Sometimes he even mentions it in a joking manner. But if you can absorb it and think on it, and to use a word that is overused these days, but to meditate on it for a while, I think we'll go very far. It certainly is not. He's not he's not exactly a politician trying to rile people up or something like that. So you have to, you have to grab it when you can. And I think that is the key, to how to pull away from him or towards yourself, the lessons that I think he would want us to learn. He's very conscious, of people when they listen to him and so forth. I think that's the key. I think we in 2019, was it or so? I think it was just pre-COVID that we had a meeting which was initiated by His Holiness, but it was he shall we say nudged the Muslim community in Ladakh and its leadership, to have an interfaith interaction between Buddhism and Islam in New Delhi. And we had it at India International Center. And, it was one of the sort of biggest events that I think that the Leh Muslim community, or Ladakh's Muslim community, both Leh and Kargil, had, on that occasion. And it was, as I said, initiated by His Holiness. And I wish that we as a community could have, followed it up the following year with something. And I tried very hard to suggest to the community, I said, His Holiness has done his part. Now let's do our part. Even if you do it in Ladakh, even if you do it in a very small way. But, those were tumultuous times and so forth in many ways. 2018 and 19 were difficult years in Kashmir and the then J&K state. And so because of that, it didn't follow up, but it was also because of the, people didn't take that initiative. But I hope to revive it, actually, and not myself, but, the community there, to say that, hey, you should follow up. And we can do it anywhere. We can do it in Leh, we can do it in Delhi itself, somewhere for that thing. So, because I think that's what needs to happen. He has these events. 2017 event was very much like that. But after His Holiness did everything and worked so hard, along with the team that he designated, we didn't follow up.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do, I think, is, sort of the profound simplicity of what he says is one part of it, But I think the other part is his method and the virtues that he brings in everything that he does, And so we need to emulate method as well as virtues that he brings to the table each time. And then I think that it will catch on like a pebble dropped in a pond. The ripple effect can be very good, if we listen to him.
No, and as you talked about his methodology, I also had a conversation earlier with Dr. Richie Davidson about the science of the mind and His Holiness's efforts in promoting human values of compassion and goodness. And Dr. Richie Davidson was saying His Holiness challenged the scientists then to look at, not to look at only the problems like stress and anger and issues like that, but also to look at what is good in people and study compassion, and that's taken off. And I think in the same way with religion, I think he tells us, he speaks about, as I was listening to you, he speaks about talking about the commonalities we have and not about the differences, bringing those forward.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think that is what it is, and I think it has to do with not finding in the commonalities some sort of easy unity. It's not. I think that finding for example, it's very easy to say and think even that all religions are the same, actually, but they're not. They're very different. How a Buddhist prays is very different from how a Christian prays, very different from how a thing. But if we can actually believe that we're all, in the end, struggling for the same thing, I think then that's a big, that makes a big difference. There's also harm, I think, in pretending that all religions are the same. I mean, both in form, in form, they're not. In essence, they may be the same. But in order to talk about essence, you have to know it. You have to know your own religion very well in order to find commonalities for it with Buddhism, and not just stop at the forms and say, oh, no, it's very different. I mean, that's also a bad conclusion to come to. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's a too facile a thing to say that they're all the same, but to understand that they're all the same is quite different, and how you arrive at it, I think, is different.
And I think, as His Holiness says, in today's world, when we are all, so we're not, separated in our own regions as we were many years back. But now our societies are so integrated that our neighbors, we have so many different religions together. It's all the more important, His Holiness.
Yes. I mean, another very poignant incident with His Holiness was a later meeting after my teenage meeting, and it was still late teenage, but I was about to leave New Delhi and come to the US for my BA, my sort of degree, BA degree. And my father said, you must go to His Holiness and you must speak to him and so forth. It was my father would occasionally sort of just out of the blue say, you better go and visit. So I would, I went and visited him, and I kept saying to him, I really want to help the Tibet cause, so please tell me, what should I do? What should I do? He never said anything, and eventually he said to me on that same one occasion, the second, no, it wasn't the second, but it was one of the early times when I met him. He said, don't worry, just practice your religion even when you're in the US, and he didn't say anything about Tibet or so forth. So I remember being a little bit disappointed. Here I was, I was saying I want to do something, but I think he it had a meaning. I mean, much later in life, I've understood why he said that, and things. So he's very, I mean, his in a way, he is very elliptical in how he approaches, I guess, he approaches different individuals in different ways. But, that I remember that so very clearly, that he said what he said to me on that occasion.
Goes back to, I think, what you said earlier about his point in going also recognizing the Lhasa Muslim community in Ladakh, all of those, keeping those connections, because those are all important aspects of Tibet that have a relevance also, and a message today as well.
Yes, very much. The important aspect being? there was a community there. I mean, people were different but still got along and went along very well.
Got
And
along
so,
perfectly. And in fact,
yes,
the Muslim communities, we always admire the Muslim community on how well spoken their Tibetan was as
yes,
compared to
yes, yes, very true.
sometimes us, because I grew up in exile, so my Tibetan is kind of a hodgepodge of different regions of Tibet. But
Yes,
the Lhasa the Muslim communities, Tibetan is
yeah,
pure
very.
Lhasa.
Yes, yes, yes. Because they had to depend almost entirely on thing because they were not necessarily lettered in Tibetan. They didn't know how to read, and I mean, quite a few of them did, but most of them would not. No. But so they were dependent totally on the spoken word, and they polished it, I think, and did very well at it. So, yes.
Thank you, Siddiqla. Anything else you would like to add before we?
So I mean, no, I think one of the things that I think is important in terms of observations of His Holiness's engagements, is we have to really appreciate his sacrifice, and the sacrifice is that I have no doubt that because of the sort of it is because of his bodhisattvic sense of duty, towards all living beings and sentient beings, things. And I think that that's important because this was no small sacrifice. I'm sure that he would have preferred to study, read, meditate, and basically become a Tathagata, thus gone, if you will. But he has sacrificed that, in order to, at the core of it, of course, the Tibetan community and its sort of exilic existence to somehow mitigate the pain of that, but also in the larger sense, now broadening his scope, so to speak about, sort of ethics and secular ethics and the need for people to, I mean, I think that these are very precious sacrifices that he's made, and I think it's important for us to recognize that. I think.
No, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Siddiqla. Thank you. All right. With that,
Right. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of Tibet Talks. We'll be back next week with the third episode in this special series, looking at His Holiness's third commitment, a commitment to the preservation of Tibetan culture. You don't want to miss that either, so make sure to check it out. But until then, as we always say on Tibet Talks, stay safe, stay well, and stay active. Tujachay.